Good morning, students. In previous lecture, we discussed about the various life processes which are required to sustain life on Earth, and out of which one important process is nutrition. Nutrition is a process of acquiring food and utilizing it for further to acquire energy and growth and maintenance processes. And on the basis of how a particular organism acquires its food, organisms are classified into two types, and you can say there are two modes of nutrition: autotrophic and heterotrophic. Autotrophs organisms or autotrophic mode of nutrition is a particular process in which plants or some bacteria having and algae which have a green colored pigment called chlorophyll in their cells, they capture sunlight and they use simple inorganic substances like carbon dioxide and water vapor to form an organic compound, glucose, in the form of food. And heterotrophic organisms are those organisms which obtain their food directly or indirectly from plants or some other organisms, and they acquire energy by digesting these organic substances. Next is how is photosynthesis takes place and what is actually the process by which plants prepare their own food. As you split this term photosynthesis, photo means light and synthesis means to produce something. So photosynthesis is the process by which cells synthesize or produce organic compounds in the form mainly glucose from inorganic molecules like carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight. And this process requires a photosynthetic pigment called chlorophyll, which is actually present in a cell organelle called chloroplast, and it is mainly found in green plants, algae, and certain bacteria. Here you can see on the screen one leaf is shown, and the middle part of the leaf between the upper epidermis and lower epidermis, if we go through the cross section of leaf, you can find cells having chloroplast as they are seen in green color. The mesophyll part of leaves is filled with parenchyma cells having chloroplast, and these kind of parenchymatous cells are called chlorenchyma. And as you can see, lower epidermis has plenty of pores in the surface, which are known as stomata. And stomata helps in gaseous exchange. Whenever carbon dioxide is required for photosynthesis, these stomatal pores open and gaseous exchange takes place. And water vapor or water is basically absorbed by the roots of the plants for the process of photosynthesis. Next, this is the chemical equation which is taking place when photosynthesis is occurring in the cells of the plants. And in this process, as we have already discussed, carbon dioxide and water molecules combine together in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll to form glucose as a food material, and byproduct oxygen gas is produced, which is released in surroundings in environment, and the whole process is taking place in the chloroplast of each and every plant cell. So this is how the process takes place. Actually, each chloroplast is made up of certain plate-like structures which are stacked over each other in the form of grana. And these granum is singular term and plural it is called grana. And grana is actually responsible for absorbing sunlight. As you can see here in this picture, these grana are actually responsible for absorbing sunlight because these grana contains a green colored pigment, chlorophyll, and light is absorbed by this pigment, and then the light energy is converted into chemical energy here, and water molecule breaks up into oxygen gas and hydrogen ions. And the process is known as photolysis. Photolysis means photo means light and lysis means breaking down. Splitting of water molecule take place to release oxygen gas and hydrogen ions. And these hydrogen ions are further utilized to produce some important intermediates. And this the step is actually taking place in this part, which is called grena, and this is actually called light reaction. And the next step takes place in this part, which is known as trauma, as you can see here in the diagram. And this is called the dark reaction, in which actually carbon dioxide is converted into glucose by the process of reduction, and glucose is formed as a product of photosynthesis, which is an organic compound, a carbohydrate, which decomposes in mitochondria of each and every cell to produce energy whenever it is required. And the entire glucose molecule does not produce, or you can say, doesn't get consumed uh, immediately after it is formed. Rather, it is changed into starch and stored by uh, plant cells for reserved food material. So all plant cells store these starch in the form of reserved food material. This is how these stomata open and close in order to allow gaseous exchange. Here you can see the diagram. Each stomata pore, which is known as stoma, is surrounded by a pair of cells, which is known as guard cells. And these guard cells actually, when absorb water, then they swell up, and during or due to their swelling, these stoma opens, and whenever the water molecules are lost by these uh, stomatal guard cells, these guard cells shrink, and the stomata or the stoma pore becomes closed. And this is how, whenever carbon dioxide or gaseous exchange is required, these guard cells open and close stomata. And when photosynthesis is not taking place inside the cell of the plants, at that time, the stomata remain closed to prevent the excess loss of water in the form of transpiration. So as we have seen that photosynthesis requires a kind of uh, raw materials like carbon dioxide and water, and an essential component which is present inside the leaf, that is chlorophyll. So let us prove with the help of some experiment that whether photosynthesis can take place without chlorophyll or not. For this, we need to take a variegated leaf. Variegated leaf is actually a kind of leaf which has some area without chlorophyll. As you can see, patches are present in some different color. The green patches are filled with chlorophyll, and these have chloroplast, but whereas the other portions, which are non-green part of the leaves, uh, do not have chloroplast in them. So let us perform this activity. Firstly, we need to select this plant, and we need to keep it in dark for 3 days in order to consume the entire starch which is reserved food material. तो उसको खत्म करने के लिए हमें इसको dark में रखना है, and then we need to place it in sunlight for 6 hours in order to perform photosynthesis. Then next we need to detach a leaf and mark the green areas over it, and we need to trace these areas on a butter paper so that we can later compare that in which region the food was formed. Next is the boil the leaf for few minutes in order to make the cells die, and then place it in alcohol. Alcohol actually it is to be boiled into alcohol because alcohol dissolves chlorophyll in it. So after that boiling in alcohol using a water bath, because alcohol is otherwise highly inflammable, so avoid direct heating alcohol. Then after removal of chlorophyll from the leaf, this colorless leaf is put into iodine solution, and then after rinsing it, we need to observe it. As you can see here, that some portion of leaves acquire bluish black color, which is due to the presence of starch. So this activity shows that starch is produced only in those part of leaf which contain chloroplast. So hence this activity proved. Next activity, we can prove that carbon dioxide is also necessary for photosynthesis. For this experiment, we require two potted plants, and this is actually a KOH experiment where potassium hydroxide is used to absorb carbon dioxide. We need to take two potted plants of same size here, and then again we need to keep them in dark room in order to consume the entire starch which was produced earlier or which was reserved food material. Then we need to place them on glass tiles and place KOH powder near one plant, as you can see in the figure, and then place a bell jar, glass bell jar over both of the plants. And why we are using glass apparatus here? Because glass has quite smooth surface, so we can easily make them airtight so that air should not enter in that. And moreover, if still we find some air gaps, so we can apply Vaselines to, you can say, make it airtight setup. As you can see here, we need to apply Vaseline in order to keep the setup airtight. Then place the both of these setup in sunlight for few hours. And as we'll see that the setup in which KOH was placed, first setup, this plant will not have CO2 in that well jar because the entire CO2 will be absorbed by KOH. Whereas the another plant which doesn't have KOH placed nearby will be able to perform photosynthesis. So pluck one leaf from both of the plants and then again follow the same procedure by boiling them in water, then in alcohol, then dip them in iodine solution. And as you can see, that plant with KOH plate shows no sign of starch, no color change is there, whereas plant without KOH will show blackish blue color. Hence, we can say that carbon dioxide is essential for photosynthesis. So, by using these two simple activities, we can prove that carbon dioxide and chlorophyll are essential for photosynthesis. Can you guess or can you tell one experiment? Can you design one experiment to uh, prove that sunlight is necessary for photosynthesis? So think about that. I will discuss it in tomorrow's class. Okay. You have to think about an experiment which you can design in order to prove that sunlight is required for photosynthesis.